One of Them Days is a certified hood classic, if I do say so myself, and I can't wait to talk about this thing, so let's just jump right into it. But as always, before we get started, if you're new here, my name is Erin, and I talk all things movies and TV, but really mostly movies, so if you're into that sort of thing, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me. That would be greatly appreciated on my end. And also, if you've already seen this movie, let me know your thoughts on it in the comments. But without further ado, let's talk about One of Them Days. So in this, we follow two friends who are played by Kiki Palmer and Issa, and once one of their boyfriends steals their rent money, they now have to race against the clock and pay their rent before they get evicted. But of course, instead of that happening, they run into all types of troubles and, well, have one of them days. Jumping right into the good, and the first thing I have here is both Kiki Palmer and Issa. Now, starting with Kiki Palmer, there is no question that she is a superstar, and she simply just does not get talked about enough, in my opinion. She has been doing this since Akeelah and the Bee, and the fact that she just doesn't get talked about like other A-list actors her age is just crazy to me, because as I said before, she is a superstar today and always has been a superstar. She is absolutely hilarious in this movie and is a big reason on why this movie works. She has so many one-liners in this and makes so many little faces that just make you laugh out loud, and her chemistry with SZA was really good. Their relationship and banter back and forth in this thing was the best part of the movie. Now, in terms of acting, obviously Kiki Palmer killed it, there is no question there, but here I really want to talk about SZA because she also held her own, and that is very impressive considering she was paired up with someone like Kiki Palmer. She had her moments where she was cracking jokes and just being goofy, and she is just really naturally funny in my opinion, and she was a lot of fun to watch on screen along with Kiki Palmer. These two gave this movie a lot of life, and on top of their characters being funny, we also got to see them grow as well and come into their own by the end of the movie, which was really cool to see. Next up for the good is the humor. Now, with this being a January movie, I'll be honest, I was a little worried that this would just be another comedy where really none of the jokes landed, and this whole thing just fell flat because, as we all know, January movies tend not to be the best films in the world, but I'm happy to say that I think the humor absolutely delivered in this thing. This thing sells itself on its humor, so I am really glad that it was genuinely a funny movie because, as I said before in past movie reviews, I hate when movies force their humor. It just kind of takes me out of the movie and makes you cringe sometimes, and this movie absolutely did not do that in my opinion. For the most part, a lot of this humor felt natural. There is a scene in this movie where our main characters are trying to get a loan in order to pay rent, and I think it's one of the funniest parts of this entire film because all three of the characters that were in that scene just had such great chemistry with each other, and it just seemed like they were bouncing off each other from one joke to another, and it just worked really well and turned out to be, in my opinion, the funniest part of the movie. And shout out to Kayla Monteroso, I think that's how you pronounce it, because she was hilarious in that scene, along with Kiki Palmer and SZA, of course. Now, I'm not saying all of the jokes landed, but for the most part, I did find myself laughing out loud at a lot of the humor in this thing. And finally, for the good is that I just love the type of movie this is. While I was watching this, it just really reminded me of movies like Friday, Barbershop, heck, First Sunday, for those of you who remember that movie that starred Tracy Morgan and Ice Cube, and I think Katt Williams was in it as well. But it was just so refreshing watching this movie because they just don't make films like this anymore. Nowadays, it's just a bunch of sequels or movies that are just dealing with big IPs, and I'm not hating on those movies at all because I have enjoyed my fair share of those films over the past few years. But it was just nice to get a movie that has a simple plot where our characters have a problem, they set out to stop that problem, and they learn a lesson along the way with plenty of laughs and fun in between. It just really reminds me of those comedies that we got in the late 90s / early 2000s, and I think today this is a movie that usually gets released on streaming and just gets lost in time. So I'm super glad that this got a theatrical release because I think in 10 to 15 years or so, we are going to be rewatching and quoting this movie almost like we do Friday, even though it's definitely not as good as Friday. I'm just kind of making that comparison that we will be watching this movie in the years to come because it is very rewatchable in my opinion. Moving on to the so-so, and the only thing I have here is that as much as I did like the humor in this, I have to say at times in this movie, it did start to feel like a compilation of skits. This was really more in the first half of the movie as our main characters were just going around town trying to find ways to get money in order to pay rent. Essentially, we would just jump from place to place. They would pull off some type of joke or goofy moment, and then we'd go to the next place and do the exact same thing. The jokes were funny, but they did kind of just rinse and repeat this process throughout that first half of the movie. So after a while, it did kind of feel like they were just doing a bunch of SNL skits back to back to back. But once we got to the second half, they did start to balance out some of those more humorous and goofy moments with some more character moments, which I thought worked really well. And finally, getting into the bad. Now, there wasn't much bad in this movie, but for the sake of the video, if I had to pick something, I would say that it was pretty cliche. This was about a 90-minute comedy, and it hits just about every usual beat that a comedy usually hits. Our characters set out to solve a problem, and all is fun and games until it isn't, and then they obviously hit rock bottom, but they pick themselves back up and figure out a way to solve that problem, all while learning a lesson along the way. So yes, this is your typical 90-minute comedy. It pretty much just follows the formula and doesn't necessarily do anything special, but it works for this movie. So at the end of the day, it's not that big of a deal because this was a genuinely good and funny movie in my opinion. So overall, One of Them Days is a funny comedy that's led by a dynamic duo of Kiki Palmer and Issa. It's got plenty of laughs and it's just a fun time overall to watch. So yes, I would definitely recommend this movie. Those are my thoughts on One of Them Days. Be sure to let me know what you thought of the movie down in the comments, and as always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, get your Eazy Apparel at shop easyapparel.com. God bless, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.